Hubert Gregg says, I call it genius. Tonight he turns a personal spotlight on Laurel and Hardy.
Just to hear that cuckoo song, the buzz of expectation and delight that ran round the movie houses in the 30s, because it could mean only one thing. Another two-reeler by Laurel and Hardy. The Englishman Arthur Stanley Jefferson from Ulverston in Lancashire, and the American Oliver Norval Hardy from the south, from, in fact, Harlem in Georgia. How on earth these two would one day come together and form the greatest comedy team that movies would ever know. But before we arrive at Laurel and Hardy, consider this voice.
I love you, I love you, I love you. You are the ideal of my dreams. I always knew 'twould be someone like you. I've loved you forever, it seems. For years in my mind's fondest fancy, a picture of your face I drew, and I knew you somehow when I met you just now. You are the ideal of my dream.
The trained tenor voice of Oliver Norval Hardy, and he used it to enormous effect in more than one film. Somehow the ladies on the celluloid didn't respond, and he was so sincere, so well-meaning. He had a certain amount of help, if that's the word, and it isn't, from his equally sincere partner, in a full-length feature called Swiss Miss, for instance.
What's the matter?
I don't know.
I know.
What?
You're in love.
In what?
In love. L-U-G-H, love.
Am I?
You certainly are.
How can you tell?
It's easy. Look at the silly, sloppy look on your face. Look at it.
Is that what it is?
Do you mind if I tell you something else?
What?
She's in love with you, too.
How do you know?
Any dumbbell can tell that. You know what you ought to do? If you play your cards right, you've got her right in the palm of your hand.
Tell me some more, Stanley.
There's nothing to tell. All you got to do is go and let her know.
But you don't understand. This is my first love affair, and I don't know how.
Say, why don't you do like the gay caviars used to do in the olden days?
The what?
The caviars.
What did they do?
Well, when they were in love, they used to go by the light of the moon, and they used to serenade their lady fair.
But suppose she's in love with someone else.
Faint heart, ne'er won fair lady.
You're right.
Now,
let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with you. Let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with you. Keep the love light burning in your eyes so blue. Let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with you.
That ought to do it, but of course it doesn't. Arthur Stanley Jefferson was born on June the 16th, 1890. In a trunk, you could say, but a leather one with brass corners. His father was doing very well indeed as a theatrical manager, and rather hoped that Stan would go in for the same. Acting was a precarious mug's game. Presenting actors, living off actors, is so much more promising. We never heed these advices, we mummers. The world is waiting for us, we tell ourselves, but it isn't. The world is like the bus of today. The driver is a past master moving away just as you put out your hand to grasp the rail. But Stan was determined. He became a hardened tumbler into the road and getter up again, and at 16 was on the boards. Norval Hardy, he added the Oliver later in memory of his father and as an adjunct to his own dignity, was born a year and a half later than Stan. His mother ran a hotel, and Norval would sit in the lobby watching people. An observer and a vaudevillian. The vaudevillian would later be the planning brain. When it came to their film comedy, he had Carlyle's famous transcendent capacity for taking trouble. The observer would bring ordinary humanity to bear, superbly. Hardy was no mere passenger in the team. In fact, his sense of character contributed most importantly to the moulding of their style. Hardy said in later years that he had seen so many Laurel and Hardys in his people-watching days. The dumb, dumb guy, these were his words, who never has anything bad happen to him, and the smart, smart guy who's dumber than the dumb guy, only he doesn't know it. Such, of course, were the two as they blossomed after much nurturing. Take this typical scene from Toad in a Hole, T-O-W-E-D. A favourite comedy ploy of theirs comes into it. Laurel has a good idea. It really is, and he expresses it well. When asked to repeat it, he's all over the place. Again, notice that Laurel's idea is conceived in modesty. It will end in disaster only because Hardy pumps it up out of all recognition. They're selling fish. Hardy is singing out the wares. Laurel blows a trumpet.
Fresh fish caught in the ocean this morning. Salmon, mackerel, swordfish, and tuna. Boy, oh boy. For the first time in our lives, we're a success. A nice little fish business and making money.
You know, Ollie, I've been thinking.
What about?
I know how we could make a lot more money.
How?
Well, if we caught our own fish, we wouldn't have to pay for it. Then whoever we sold it to, it would be clear profit.
Laurel gives another toot to his trumpet, and then, with perfect timing, we get the reaction from Hardy. The idea gets through to him, and this penetration is pointed by his slow but firm pulling on of the brake.
Tell me that again.
Well, if you caught a fish, and whoever you sold it to, they wouldn't have to pay for it. Then the profits would they'd go to the fish. If you caught...
I know exactly what you mean. Your idea is to eliminate the middleman. That's a pretty smart thought. Here we are making pennies when we should be making dollars.
Certainly. All we need is a couple of fish poles.
A couple of fish poles. With $1 million idea like that, what we're going to do is get ourselves a boat.
If only they had followed Stan's simple idea and bought the fish poles. Hardy's ideas are always grandiose. They match his physical size. He was 6'2", and though he weighed more than 200 pounds, getting on for 15 stone in Anglo-Saxon, he was athletic and enjoyed physical outlet, whether on the football field or disappearing down a mud hole. Somebody sells them a boat, sells them a pup in the way of a boat. Sorry, Hulk, but Ollie has the matter well in hand.
So far, so good. Now, let's see. I think the first thing we'd better do is to find the leaks.
How do we do that?
Well, that's simple. Fill the boat with water. Get that hose. Now hand it to me through the porthole. Oh! What are you trying to do? Put that in right. Put that hose back in that hole. What? Come up here and clean off this stench. I'll attend to the important things.
A small aquatic battle develops, which Hardy halts with quiet reasoning.
Now, wait a minute. Isn't this silly?
What?
Here we are, two grown-up men acting like a couple of children. Why, we ought to be ashamed of ourselves, throwing water at one another.
Well, you started it.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Well, I didn't.
You certainly did.
Well, I didn't.
You certainly did.
Well, I know that I didn't.
You did, too.
Well, if that's where you... Can't we stop this quarreling? That's why we never get any place. Let's put our brains together so that we can forge ahead. Remember, united we stand.
Knowing the rest of the quotation, we know the rest of the action.
Divided we fall.
In 1910, Stan and Ollie were still 3,000 miles apart. Stan found himself a member of Fred Carno's... I nearly said Fred Carno's army. Fred Carno's theatrical company. Carno, though he didn't do it with intent, was giving his artists invaluable apprenticeship for silent movies. He presented comedy sketches in mime. One sketch, Mumming Birds, had as its leading light a skinny lad named Charlie Chaplin. Carno took the troupe to America. They travelled in a cattle boat. Chaplin made a startling speech on the prow of the boat as they approached New York. "I'm going to conquer this country," he pronounced, for anyone to hear who cared to listen. "My name will be known to everyone in it." He didn't quite manage it on the first trip. The show did well, but Carno was paying them peanuts. They hadn't bargained for the high cost of living in America. He knew they wouldn't. Stan Laurel stayed at a hotel to begin with. He put his shoes out for cleaning. For the benefit of youngers, I should perhaps explain that this used to be the thing to do in England. It isn't anymore. They don't run to shoe polish, nor to anyone who will deign to do the job. But then it was general. Not in America. Stan had his shoes pinched. He moved into a room with Chaplin, and they decided to cook for themselves to save peanuts. No cooking allowed, if you mentioned it. They didn't. Chaplin played the fiddle to drown the noise while Stan was frying, and then they wafted the smoke out of the window with a towel. Stan got hungry at last, too hungry. Every actor gets hungry, but before he fell down for lack of food, he got himself back to the home country and starved here instead. And not only here, he had the distinction of starving in Holland, where he appeared in vaudeville for a defaulting manager. He had to steal bread, stuck it under his coat, and acted innocence. Hardy never had to starve. Maybe that's why we had a fat one and a thin one. In a two-reeler called Below Zero, they're street musicians. Stan at the harmonium, Ollie plucking a bass. A lady calls to Hardy from a window, addressing him as Mr. Whiteman. He really does resemble Paul Whiteman quite strongly, and he answers without a demur. It is the dead of winter. The snow is thick on the ground. Listen to the song they're coming out with.
Hold your hand and you hold hers, and that's a very good sign. She's your tootsie wootsy, the good old summer time.
boys average a street?
Let's see. Now there's, I would say about 50 cents a street.
There's $1. Move down a couple of streets.
1910 was the year of Stan Laurel's first arrival in America. He was 20. The 18-year-old Oliver Hardy was running a movie house. His father had died and the family had moved to Mill Edgeville, still in Georgia. It was the town's first bioscope. From this point, we call him by his nickname. Having a shave at the barber's he was, when this Italian shaver took a shine to him. He swamped his face in talcum powder and simpered, "Nicer baby." Baby became Babe, and the name stuck for life. Babe had had yearnings in the direction of performing. He ran away from home to join a minstrel group when he was 8, but he came back. His mother sent him to the Atlanta Conservatoire of Music, but he took time off from his studies to sing in a movie house between flicks. Now he had a movie house of his own, and how he loved those comedies he booked. A man named Lubin was making them in Florida. "I could do that," Babe said to the darkness in the bioscope, and off to Florida he went and got a job with Lubin. $5 a day, 3 days a week guaranteed. Play as cast, and carry the props, make the tea, or I suppose it was coffee. "We need a fat boy in this scene." No delicacy, but he was in. Meanwhile, back in England, Carno was preparing to send mumming birds to America for a second tour. Chaplin was engaged again, and this time Stan as his understudy. The year was 1913. The determined Charlie Chaplin received a movie offer from Max Sennett in the middle of the tour and dropped Fred Carno like a hot cookie. He shot off to California and never looked east again, for some years anyway. Stan took over his part, but Chaplin had become so popular that the bookings fell off. Carno closed the show and Stan went into American vaudeville. For a while he did well imitating Chaplin. Then he thought, this won't do. Chaplin for London was going great guns on the coast. What was wrong with young Stan Jefferson for Ulverston? Suddenly it hit him. Stan Jefferson was wrong. The name. It had 13 letters. He changed it to Stan Laurel, played Los Angeles, and got his first film contract. Stan's first movie was called Nuts in May. The producer, Stan's vaudeville employer, showed it to Charlie Chaplin, who was now calling himself Charles, and in the middle of making some of his best films for the Mutual Company. Chaplin told Stan he was thinking of setting up on his own and might be able to use him. He would be in touch. He wasn't, and Stan had 1 or 2 other offers. He held them off out of loyalty to his old roommate. At last, he decided to seek Chaplin out. He did, and found him at a restaurant. Not to intrude, he sent him a note saying, "When can we talk?" Chaplin sent back an "I don't know, but I'll call you." The great man who'd played the fiddle while Stan fried their meal never did call. As well he snubbed Stan Laurel. If he hadn't, we might not have had a fat one and a thin one. Chaplin, of course, came from poor beginnings, starving beginnings, and it is felt by some that he carried a chip on his shoulder that affected his attitude to the world, and certainly in later years his work. Superb as it was, there was an element of putting the world to rights. Laurel and Hardy played characters in this same kind of non-income bracket as Chaplin, but whereas the little tramp went wistfully against the world, Laurel and Hardy were in step with it, striving, optimistic, walking to disaster with a smiling assurance that this time the roof wouldn't fall in. In Busybodies, they have a job, and they're so thrilled. They're on their way to the day's work in their little car. "Turn on the radio," says Ollie, and Stan pulls a string that activates a gramophone under the bonnet. Babe's joy at greeting the day might well have given Oscar Hammerstein an idea for a lyric.
What a beautiful morning. Turn on the radio and let's have some music. Gee, it's great to have a good job to go to. It just makes the whole world bright. Why, even you look bright this morning.
So happy they are. We all are when we don't know what's coming. Disaster, of course, awaits. You can see it coming a mile off. Their job is in a sawmill, which tells you everything, really. At the end of the day, sacked and all but destroyed, they drive away in their little car. In their path is a floor-to-ceiling electric saw. Yes, it saws the car so neatly in half. Babe Hardy was busy playing heavies. He was built for them. In Florida and New York he filmed. Then he heard the call of the coast and entered at least the same state as his future partner. Babe was painting on the popular dark eyes and thick brows and a moustache. He became to Larry Seaman what Eric Campbell and Max Swain were to Chaplin. Strange how Hardy crossed paths with Laurel back and forth, as though fate was making a jigsaw and taking some time getting it right. The director of Stan's first movie had come from directing Babe Hardy in Florida. Stan Laurel made a few comedies with Larry Seaman. He got the sack when Antonio Marino, a romantic star of the day, saw some rushes and commented that Laurel was funnier than Seaman. Like Stan, Babe Hardy was superstitious. He consulted a numerologist and decided to use the names Oliver, Norville, Hardy, all three, for luck. I think we could say it worked. Hal Roach was born in 1892, 4 days before Babe Hardy. In 1913, he was working as an extra with Harold Lloyd. One day, mysteriously, he acquired some money. All actors try to learn the manner of this, but you have to be a member of the Magic Circle. He began employing actors. Stan's father would have approved. He employed Harold Lloyd and had some success making a series of films in which Lloyd played Lonesome Luke. There was a fashion for this. Stan made a few shorts as Hickory Hiram. The studios held the copyright of these names. You could get the sack and go to the pictures and see another Hickory Hiram. This could be the reason our two heroes stuck to their own names. Roach employed Stan to finish a series of comedies Toto the Clown had walked out of. Stan did well, but Roach let him go. He also employed Oliver Hardy as a heavy. In one shot, Hardy rode a horse towards the camera, and as he reined it in, the horse sank slowly into the sand under Ollie's weight. The crew collapsed laughing, and it was borne in upon Roach that Hardy might have a touch of comedy. Roach has gone down in movie history as the comedy master who brought Laurel and Hardy together, but clearly it wasn't going to be by a flash of inspiration. Around this time, Bronco Billy Anderson, star-turned-producer, cast both Stan and Ollie for the first time in a movie called Lucky Dog. Off-screen they liked one another, on-screen they met and went their ways unnoticed. Anderson did cast Stan in a series of shorts that lampooned famous movies, and incidentally cashed in on their fame. Valentino had made Blood and Sand. Stan was cast as Rhubarb Vasilino in Mud and Sand. Robin Hood became Rob'em Good, but when another company pinched the title, they made it When Nights Were Cold. This idea spread, and a funny thing happened to Stan on the way to the studio. In his own words, he became a star. A comedian named Joe Rock became a money man and employed Stan to make another series of lampoons. They were billed as Stan Laurel comedies. Dr. Pickle and Mr. Pride was shot on the original Hunchback of Notre Dame set. Monsieur Don't Care followed. Hal Roach had an idea at this point. It came to him out of the blue. He engaged Stan Laurel to play in a series of shorts, lampooning famous movies. He even came up with the odd title. Under Two Flags and Rupert of Hentzau became Under Two Jags and Rupert of Hee-Haw. The year was 1926, and for the first time, Stan and Ollie were under one contractual banner. Stan as a gag writer who sometimes acted. Roach still didn't put them together. Stan did direct Ollie in a film called Enough to Do. Maybe that's why he wasn't in it. I think we could say that Roach showed no flashes of insight. As a fruit seller put it to me in fruitless wartime, bananas don't grow on trees, you know. We just had to wait for the lightning to strike. Another contract player with Roach was Jimmy Findlayson, the Scottish character actor. Roach tried to make him a star, but Jimmy had only one facial expression. Very funny it was, but you couldn't stretch it effectively for 2 reels. In support, he was superb. As a furniture man, for instance, arriving at the house of Ollie and his wife, May Bush, and lodger Stan Laurel.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Finlayson.
Good afternoon.
What's the idea?
I'm here to collect the payment on the furniture.
Why, it was paid yesterday.
Steady, woman. Not to me, it wasn't.
Oliver? Oliver?
Yes, baby, I'm coming.
There must be some mistake. Oliver, did I or did I not give you the money to pay on the furniture?
You certainly did.
Then why wasn't it paid?
Well, I gave it to him to pay it for me.
Then what did you do with it?
I gave it back to him.
You gave it to me?
Yeah, I gave it to you to pay my room and board. Then you gave it to her. Remember?
Do you mean to say that the money that he gave to you, that you gave to him, that he gave to me, was the same money that I gave to him to pay him?
Well, if that was the money that you gave to him to give to me to pay to him, it must have been the money that I gave him to give to you to pay my rent, didn't I?
Mr. Finlayson, I owe you an apology.
And $37.
Then this money must belong to you.
And the next time, I want my payment without any detour. He gave it to you and you gave it to him, and who gave it to what? Why, you're all nuts!
You big dumbbell, I can't trust you to do a thing. And as for you, I've a good mind to throw you out.
You can't do it.
I can't do it.
No, because I paid my room and board in advance, and I gave it to him.
What do you mean you gave it to me? That was the money that she gave to me, and I gave it to you to give to him. Then you gave it back to me, and I had to give it to her to give to him.
Was that the money that she gave to him that I gave to you to give?
Why, certainly.
Well, if she wants to give it to him, that's her business. No use you and I arguing about it.
Oh, cut it out, cut it out.
Matrimony figured largely in the Laurel and Hardy comedies. Often Stan is the unmarried friend whom Ollie's wife can't stand. In Helpmates, Mrs. Hardy's away and the mouse plays. The next morning the house is in a terrible state, and so is Ollie. He talks to his reflection in the mirror.
Now, aren't you ashamed of yourself? A man with your supposed intelligence acting like an empty-headed idiot. What did you do? I'll tell you what you did. You took advantage of your wife's absence and pulled a wild party. And that's not all. You lost all of your ready money in a poker game. Could anything be more crass, more disgusting? There are times when I had high hopes for you, but that time is past. I'll tell you what's wrong with you in 2 words. Impossible.
A telegram arrives to say that his wife will be home at noon. Stanley's help is enlisted.
What do you want?
Listen, I'm in a slight predicament. My wife's coming home today at noon unexpectedly. And look at this house.
What's the matter with it?
What's the matter with it? You never met my wife, did you?
Yes, I never did.
What do you mean, yes, I never did? That's my wife.
Isn't she sweet?
Charming.
Where is your wife?
She's in Chicago with her mother.
She having a nice time?
Sure, she's having a nice time. She's been gone for more than a week. I don't care whether she's having a nice time or not. What I mean is, if she comes home and sees this house like this, she'll know that I've been having a wild party.
I've never known it to fail.
What?
When the mice are away, the cats are always playing around with things and doing something. If the mice run...
I want you to help me clean this house. I'd do the same for you.
No, you wouldn't.
Yes, I would.
Oh, no, you wouldn't.
How do you know I wouldn't?
Because I'm not going to get married.
Stan proving that he's no mere mindless goof. One of the arresting attributes of Stan Laurel is always his touch of cunning, the unpredictable demon holding the strings and liable to give them a tug at any moment. Sometimes he's as guileless as all get-out. In Their First Mistake, Stan has met the wife and she feels strongly about him. She admits it to Ollie.
Morning, sweetheart.
Don't good morning me. Where were you last night?
Stan took me to see a Punch and Judy show.
I'm getting sick and tired of this. It's Stan here, Stan there. Stan wants me to go here, Stan wants me to go there. I tell you, it's beginning to get on my nerves. Why, you ought to be ashamed to even be seen on the street with him. When I tell you I understand... Well, why don't you answer the telephone?
All right. Hello?
That you, Ollie?
Yes?
Say, listen, I just got a couple of tickets for tonight for the Cement Workers' Bazaar. Can you come along? We might win a prize. They're going to give away a steam shovel.
Yes, Mr. Jones. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. I certainly appreciate it. Goodbye, Mr. Jones.
Well, who was that?
That was Mr. Jones, my new boss.
Oh.
He's having a big business meeting tonight, and he wants me to attend.
Oliver.
All of the out-of-town boys are going to be there. Big, influential men. Just the kind of men that you want me to associate with.
Oh. At last you're beginning to get someplace.
It'll do me a lot of good.
Why, naturally.
It'll have a tendency to promote me to higher endeavors. I'll get it. Hello?
Hey, Ollie, this is me.
Oh, hello, Mr. Jones. Oh, don't you worry. I'm quite sure it'll be all right. Goodbye, Mr. Jones.
On the phone.
Sons of the Desert was one of their best. It goes on for 7 reels. In this one, both Stan and Ollie are married, and Ollie is lying away harder than ever. He tries to educate Stan to this. Of course, they are, so to speak, lies with the best will in the world, what Winston Churchill called terminological inexactitudes. The two are members of this strange sect, the Sons of the Desert. Today there's a Laurel and Hardy Appreciation Club that goes by the name. The movie begins with a lodge meeting, or whatever you call it. The exalted ruler, whose title Stan gets a little wrong later, makes them all take an oath to attend the convention in Chicago. If they break it, terrible things will happen to them, and go on happening, says the exalted ruler. Stan cries a bit, but pushed by Ollie, takes the oath.
Why didn't you want to take the oath?
I was afraid.
Afraid of what?
Well, I was afraid if I took the oath to go to the convention that maybe my wife wouldn't let me go.
Of course she'll let you go. Why, she'll have to let you go. You took an oath.
I know, that's what I'm worrying about. The exhausted ruler said that if you took an oath that it would have to be broken for the generations of centuries of hundreds of years. And my wife would let...
Do you have to ask your wife everything?
Well, if I didn't ask her, I wouldn't know what she wanted me to do. I didn't want to...
I never realized that such a deplorable condition existed in your home. Why don't you pattern your life after mine? I go places and do things and then tell my wife. Every man should be the king in his own castle. Now, buck up. Go in and tell her you're going to the convention. Be a man, and I'll see you in the morning.
Good night.
Good night.
They do get to go to the Chicago convention by dissembling. Ollie pretends to be ill, and Stan gets a doctor, actually a vet, to say he must go to Honolulu for his nerves. Well, he couldn't very well say he must go to Chicago. They aren't quite that dumb. The wives pack them off to this amiable island, supposedly, and later see them on a newsreel, whooping it up at the convention. The two come home loaded with deceit. Ukuleles, floral lays round their necks, singing and ringing.
Honolulu, baby, where'd you get those eyes? And your dark complexion, that right of lies. Honolulu, baby, where'd you get those eyes? And your dark complexion, that right of lies. Honolulu, baby. Aloha! Get that thing out of the way. Aloha! Aloha! Baby's home, sugar. I wonder where she is.
Maybe she went out.
I know she went out, but what I'd like to know is where did she went?
Maybe she went to the mountains with Betty.
That's probably just where she is. She makes me sick. She knew we were coming home today. What did she have to go to the mountains for?
Well, if she didn't go to the mountains, Muhammad would have to come here.
The payoff at the end is superb. The wives have a quick bet. Which husband will lie and which tell the truth? We know the answer to that, and the film ends with mayhem at the Hardy house, and at the Laurels, Stan, a sultan in his own right, is being waited on hand and foot by a spouse who's won her bet. The near demise of Hardy under a blitz of kitchen utensils brings me to one reservation I have about the two. Not alone about them, about comedy in general of this kind. I can't bear to look on while things are being destroyed. Property, I mean. It didn't begin with the war. I've always felt like this. I don't think I'm alone. I don't mind a touch of destruction, but nothing too total. Mind you, Hardy does these things with such a grace that even the destruction of his dignity saddens me. I don't mind unduly when the thing being destroyed isn't up to much anyway, or has it coming. In a silent short called The Finishing Touch, they are builders out to finish building a house in a day. Everything goes wrong. When the owner arrives to give them their bonus as agreed, he takes a look at the finished dwelling. I don't think his eyesight's too good, because they get their money. The house looks like anything I might run up. Crooked, insecure, the walls looking for all the world, as Jerome K. Jerome put it, as though they'd been smoothed down with a rake. The last touch in The Finishing Touch, was it Hal Roach? Was it Stan who pondered night and day over their comedy? Let's give everyone the benefit of the brilliant doubt. They all survey the property, and then the smallest bird you've ever seen flies around and alights so gently on the tip of the roof. And this does it. The house reacts like Edward G. Robinson as Little Caesar when they get him, but he isn't going to die in a hurry. It buckles, it caves in, it totters, and down it comes. Now that destruction I didn't mind, nor did I object to the demise of the automobiles in two tars. The film seems to be about this. Dozens of vehicles in a jam and drivers in a pet. They tear each other's models wing from wing with slow, considered action. I didn't care. They looked ready for the scrapyard anyway. Perhaps the producer was saving his jack. Nor did I mind their destruction of Billy Gilbert's living room in the music box. He was horrid to them when they were halfway up the 300 steps with that piano. Set the police on him. He had it coming. The music box won an award for being the best short made in 1932. It's a player piano they deliver. The living room is a shambles, but they plug in the instrument. It plays a jaunty tune, and as they begin to clear up the unclear-uppable, they do a superb little impromptu dance.
Now let's get this place cleaned up.
What is the meaning of this?
Do you live here?
Do I live here? This is my home. What are you doing here?
Why, we just delivered your piano.
Piano? Piano? I hate and detest pianos.
Gilbert is about to destroy them when the piano launches into the national anthem. For a brief moment, all three stand to attention. It's a classic scene. Hal Roach had put Laurel and Hardy together in the cast of a silent short called Slipping Wives, but their first real teaming came in Putting Pants on Philip. Laurel played a Scottish relative arriving in America in a kilt. Hardy's attempts to get him fitted up with more suitable trousers are certainly very funny, but the characters as we know them didn't emerge. Laurel was still feeling around for his true screen personality. Hardy was too, but didn't know it, perhaps. In Love and Hisses, Hardy was a bullying army sergeant, still the heavy. Laurel, a rookie, relying on effeminate actions and attitudes for laughs. Gradually, they became more and more themselves. Their timing developed. It was Stan who slowed down the tempo, which Max Sennett had thought right for comedy, and Roach was following. Mounting hysteria with a chase at the end, Stan brought it down to a thinking pace. Hardy was invaluable here. In a Roach film called Why Girls Love Sailors, he was sloshed in the face by water from a bucket. He'd forgotten the water was coming and knew that a reaction was called for. They made the story up as they went along in those days. The camera was turning. Hardy picked up his wet tie, looked at it, and then instinctively, because he says there were ladies present, he reacted politely by twiddling the tie and smiling. In the same film, he had to be exasperated. Suddenly, he looked straight at the camera, taking it into his sad confidence. Now, these two actions were developed to a fine, slow-moving art. Out with hysteria, in with thought and reality. They were ready for the transition when sound shook the world, for one simple reason, realism. They had become themselves. They used their own voices and didn't overuse them. The comedy continued cagily to be visual, with speech only when the action demanded it. Then, gradually, writers came into their own, but Stan supervised so brilliantly that their comedies never relied on gags, always on truth and character. Another scene from Thicker Than Water has them in an auction room. When a lady asks Ollie to keep the bidding open for her, his southern politeness compels him to agree. This is the real Oliver Norval Hardy. He is guileless and doesn't expect guile in others. He bids and finds he has a rival.
$225. $225.
$230.
$230. $230. What?
Just a minute.
All right, lady, take your time.
Please, sir, will you do me a favor? My heart is set on having that clock, and I find I've left my money at home. Will you keep the bidding open until I go home and get it? Don't let anyone have it under any consideration, and I'll pay you well for your trouble.
My dear madam, being a true Southerner, chivalry is my middle name, to say nothing of the hospitality.
$230. I'm bid. Do I hear any more? $230. $235. $235.
I'll be back in a minute.
$235 once. $235 twice. Third and last call. $240. $240. $240. Do I hear any more? $240. $245. $245. $250. $250. $250. $255. $255. $260. $260. $265. $265. $270. $270. What are you bidding against me for?
Well, you're bidding against me. $275.
$280. $285.
$285.
$290. $290. Sold to the jolly gentleman on my left for $290.
Thank you.
They wind up, so to speak, with a grandfather clock. I can't bear the next bit. A vehicle passes over it in the street. Destruction. Sound added greatly to cinematic destruction. Chaplin, of course, was up the creek over sound. In the Carnot days, he must have had a gorgeous Cockney accent, but he'd spent a small fortune learning elocution, and by then had a high-pitched voice and a delivery that sounded like a cabinet minister of uncertain political affiliations. How would he marry this to the little tramp? He held out for as long as possible and then discarded the tramp and came at us with messages. From Laurel and Hardy we got only one message, ever, and we could take that or leave it. It was simply, try again. Here they are in the fixer-uppers, trying again as self-employed people. We all know, especially if we are, that the self-employed are the most downtrodden in the world. If we don't know, we should, and that's why we are. The downtrodden, self-employed Laurel and Hardy are Christmas card manufacturers. What else? They knock on a door, and to it comes the familiar movie alcoholic Arthur Houseman with an ice bag on his head.
Good morning, sir. We're taking orders for Christmas cards. I designed them myself, and my partner, Mr. Laurel, wrote the beautiful verse.
Swell.
May I read you one?
Read 'em.
Thank you, sir. 'Twas Christmas Day in the poorhouse, and the boys were feeling blue. The boys in gray were fighting. A Merry Christmas to you.
And a Happy New Year to you.
Especially for the ladies. Jingle bells, coming through the rye. I wish you a Merry Christmas, even as you and I.
It took the very words out of my mouth.
What's the matter with it?
No sentiment.
Ask if he's got a mother. That generally gets him.
You ask him.
Did you ever have a mother?
Oh! Now you hit me.
That's fine. We have one here dedicated to mothers. May I read it to you?
Read it.
Merry Christmas, Mother. Merry Christmas, Ma. Hi, Mommy, Mommy, and a hot cha-cha.
A beautiful thought. I'll take one.
The Fixer-Uppers also contains one of my favorite exchanges between the two.
Hello? It sure is.
Who was it?
Oh, some fella having a joke.
Well, what did he say?
Well, I said hello, and the fella said, it's a long distance from Atlanta, Georgia. And I said, it sure is. Silliest thing I ever
I
did.
wish there was some way to put a stop to those practical jokers.
Of course, we all have our favorites. If we are, as the moderns say, I think expressions are usually out before they get round to me, in to Laurel and Hardy. This is perhaps the most famous.
Well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
Gotten me, you notice, not us. Hardy was able to lampoon his own dignity while still holding on to his southern pride. His name, he claimed, went back to the Hardy who was Nelson's #1 at Trafalgar. When I consider this, I'm unable to resist a mental movie of Babe playing his ancestor. Poor old Nelson's about to peg out and says, "Kiss me, Hardy." Hardy, as Hardy, would simply have to come back with,
I have nothing to say.
in 1932, Hal Roach gave them time off, and they thought they'd take a holiday in Britain. Stan would visit his relations, Oliver would play his favourite golf at St Andrews and on other courses. They were astonished to be greeted everywhere by hordes of admirers. The extent of their fame had never occurred to them, nor to Hal Roach. This could bump their price up. He must have been sorry they didn't holiday at home. It was one of their very best feature pictures, Way Out West, produced by Stan Laurel, that put them in the hit parade, posthumously. But I find it hard to think of Stan and Babe in terms of common or garden human decline and fall. The Trail of the Lonesome Pine, a simple ditty. The Avalon Boys are playing it, and one is singing, as the two stand at the bar in Jimmy Findlayson's saloon. They join in the song, and Stan waxes soulful. At one point he produces, or appears to produce, a very deep bass voice. Hardy looks at him, then at us, then he looks around him for an implement, finds one, and bops Stan over the head. Stan at once changes from deep bass to soprano. At the end of the song, he reacts to the blow and collapses. Here it all is, straight off the ranch, or hit parade. They'd have been staggered and delighted.
On a mountain in Virginia stands a lonesome pine. Just below is the cabin home of a little girl of mine. Her name is June, and very, very soon she'll belong to me. For I know she's waiting there for me 'neath that lone pine tree. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine, in the pale moonshine, our hearts entwine, where she carved her name and I carved mine. Oh June, just like the mountains are blue, like the pine, I am lonesome for you. In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine.
In the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine. In the pale moonshine, our hearts entwine, where she carved her name and I carved mine. Oh, June, like the mountains I'm blue, like the pine, I am lonesome for you.
Virginia, on the trail of the lonesome pine.
Stan Laurel, like any accomplished vaudevillian, was full of parlour tricks. We rejoiced in these at school, I remember. "I'm playing nosy, earsy, kneesy," Stan would say. Ollie would try, but would never admit defeat. His payoff would be, "That's silly." Finger wiggle, we lads got up to. Ollie never made that either. And the trick of striking his thumb alight came into more than one movie. That drove Ollie stark raving mad. I could never work that one out. I suppose he had an invisible cap over his thumb and struck it against the underside of his fingers using his thumb as a match. Supposing, as far as we kids got, we didn't experiment. The drinking scenes, they played those brilliantly. In Fra Diavolo, they get at the wine in the cellar. In The Bohemian Girl, Stan is using a suction tube to fill wine bottles from a vat. When moving from one bottle to the next, he takes in quite a bit. The laughter scenes, whether they follow the drinking or the laughing gas, done to a turn and never so much as singed. And, of course, Stan can cry with the best of them. Did they make too many movies? Out with the statistics. Stan made 75 on his own. Hardy, now this is surprising, I think, made more than 200. Together they made 105. I'm delighted, but the human fact remains that if they had made a mere couple of dozen, they would be cult figures. Me, I'm happy to run their movies again and again and again. Of course, they come up against the law.
What's your name?
Stanley Laurel.
What's your name?
Oliver Norval Hardy.
In Pardon Us, which isn't a bad title for a film about jail, Laurel has a buzzing tooth. At the end of every sentence, it blows a raspberry. Prohibition is still in, and they're home-brewing beer. But Stan makes a wrong sale.
Well, there's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
What do you mean I got you into?
Well, you sold that policeman that bottle of beer, didn't you?
I thought he was a streetcar conductor.
In Scram, they come up before the judge.
180 days. All right, come on, you. Next case. Laurel and Hardy. Take off your hat. You're charged with vagrancy. Are you guilty or not guilty? Not guilty, Your Highness. On what ground?
We went on the grounds. We were sleeping on a park bench.
The jail wasn't full. I'd give you both 180 days. Inasmuch as the jail is full, I'm going to give you both just 1 hour. Thank you, sir. To get out of town. And never let me set eyes on you again. Case dismissed.
Does that mean we can go back and sleep on the park bench?
Scram, or I'll build a jail for you.
As single lads, as henpecked husbands, as down-and-outs, as vagrants, as willing workers, as self-employed workers, they really did excel. In the Laurel and Hardy murder case, Hardy questions Stan about his antecedents.
Where were you born?
I don't know.
Fancy not knowing where you were born.
Well, I was too young to remember. How do I know where I was born?
Didn't you once tell me that you had an uncle?
Sure, I've got an uncle. Why?
Now we're getting someplace. Is he living?
No. He fell through a trapdoor and broke his neck.
Was he building a house?
No, they were hanging him.
Stan had a kind of stateless accent. Ollie was strictly from Georgia. At the end of Way Out West, Stan, for the sake of a gag, moves his roots from Lancashire to the capital. Innocence has triumphed, and they're travelling away from villainy with little Mary Roberts. After the exchange of dialogue, they begin to ford the same stream they forded the other way at the beginning of the movie. On that occasion, Hardy disappeared down a deep underwater hole. Well, we're waiting for it again, and are not disappointed. Listen for the splash. But here first are the dialogue and the dignity and the song.
Now that our troubles are over, where do we go from here?
Well, I'd like to go back to the town where I was born.
Where is that?
Way down south.
Are you from the South?
I sure am.
Well, fan my brow. I'm from the South.
You are?
Mm-hmm.
Well, shut my mouth. I's from the south, too.
South of what, sir?
The south of London.
London. Well, honey, we'll all go down to Dixie. Oh, for a slice of possum and yam.
Ooh, yes, sir, and some good old fish and chips. I can smell them.
Fish and chips.
We're going to go, we're going to go, we're going to go way down in Dixie, where the hens are doggone glad to lay scrambled eggs in the new morn hay. We're going to see, we're going to see, we're going to see our home in Dixie. You can tell where we're going to. D-I-X.
I know how to spell it.
Then we're going,
All right, we're going.
you know we're going,
Bet we're going.
to a home in Dixieland. We're going to go way down in Dixie, where the hens are doggone glad to lay scrambled eggs in the new morn hay. We're going to see, we're going to see, we're going to see.
Away they go, Stan Laurel and Oliver Norval Hardy. By the grace of Edison, or Freeze Green, or no matter who, they will always be back. Good night to you.